It appears that my transcript of my online communications with Jesus, mostly via Brent Spiner, MD, has been added to the biblical canon. In my video for today, I feature a photo of Lori McBride's handiwork over Atlanta, Georgia, from one of my Facebook friends who lives in Atlanta. It's interesting how all the hurricanes and tropical storms that Lori McBride is orchestrating, my powerful Gail shield, is deflecting them out to sea. But she still tries. And I find it interesting that 72,000 pounds of chocolate caught on fire on a Missouri interstate right at a time that I mentioned at Facebook that my favorite food is chocolate milk, which I make from powdered milk and chocolate syrup. I am right now very, very tight because Lori McBride has apparently cut off a lot of my financial support. So if you'd like to give me some financial help, my PayPal email is schulergail@gmail.com, and you can see that right there on the screen. And you can also join my Patreon. This will help me to devote more of my time to my writing and online presence, which Jesus considers very important. I've lost significant support in the last 6 months. I am in Zechariah 9:15. I asked Jesus about this, and he said, "That's you in there." And here is the verse taken from the NIV, from Zechariah 9:15. "And the Lord Almighty will shield them," Gail shield. "They will destroy and overcome with sling stones. They will drink and roar as with wine. They will be full like a bowl used for sprinkling the corners of the altar." I do believe this verse will have multiple fulfillments, and that it's inferring the final battle between Jesus and Satan. Though notice his shield is mentioned, and I have a powerful Gail shield that is part of how God made me, and it gets strong when I do the Gail commandments and increase my following. But I think it will have an earlier fulfillment before the final battle, or the Battle of Armageddon, related to me and my men, possibly against the evil Jesuits. It's also interesting that this prophecy is in the book of Zechariah, and that I led the Antichrist, he's now ex-Antichrist, Zach Knight, to the Lord in 2016. Zach and Zech sound similar. Zach Knight is now one of my men. Please note that sling stones are mentioned in the verse, and my genetic profile is literally half of my genetic profile is King David. I mean, really, literally. Regarding the Northridge earthquake, this happened on January 17th, 1994, and I mentioned how let me just say this. The only Hollywood people who died worked for Paramount Studios, and 57 people died. My birthday, September 15th, 1957. In fact, today's my birthday. It was a Paramount Studios Jesuit woman attorney who sent me the letter accusing me of harassment for writing Brent Spiner friendship letters in response to his intimate phone calls to me from 1991 to 1993. I got that letter I think it was on the 16th. I believe it was on January the 16th, 1994, a day before the earthquake hit. And what I did is, that earthquake was an answer to my 3-hour prayer, crying and asking Jesus to forgive me for shaming his name by my long-distance adulterous friendship with Brent Spiner. I lived in Seattle, in Linwood, Washington at the time. And it was a Paramount Studios Jesuit attorney, probably hired by Lori McBride herself. Brent Spiner did not sign that statement. I mean, that letter that I got. I noticed his signature. I threw it out because I was disgusted with it. And that earthquake was Jesus's statement over how he felt about that letter that I got from Lori McBride's Jesuit lawyer. And 57 people died. And the only Hollywood people who died worked for Paramount Studios. At that time, Brent Spiner was working at Paramount Studios, and they were behind that letter. It was a Paramount Studios. He was working for Star Trek: The Next Generation, and 57 people died. I'm born in 1957. Then there was an Ash Wednesday earthquake that hit me in Seattle when I lived there in Mukilteo, a North Seattle suburb, in 2001. It was 57 kilometers, or 5 times 7 equals 35 miles deep. Again, my birthday is 9/15/57. I'm the King David woman of Zechariah 9:15. Notice it hit on Ash Wednesday, a major Roman Catholic holiday. And at the time it happened, I was going through a divorce with my Jesuit husband, who was also working for Jesuit Laurie McBride at the time. The Jesuit order is part of the Roman Catholic Church. Apparently, the Ash Wednesday earthquake was God's statement against the Roman Catholic Church for what they were doing to Brent and me while I went through my divorce and while I tried to be with my long-distance lover, Brent, at the time. And I lived in the Anchor Village Apartments at 9511 49th Avenue West, apartment 17G, Mukilteo, Washington, when the Ash Wednesday quake hit Seattle. They're now called the Elliott at Mukilteo Apartments. I actually ran out into the parking lot, going down a stairwell during the quake, which I learned later was probably the worst thing I could have done. You know, being raised in Florida, my husband was a Coast Guard guy, and we were stationed there. I had no idea how to act in an earthquake, but God had me covered. And Mukilteo is a northern suburb of Seattle. I wanted to marry Brent right away after the divorce, but Jesuit complications made it impossible. And to let the world know that God didn't send that earthquake as a judgment against me, because I lived in Seattle where the earthquake hit, nobody died in that earthquake, except a person who got a heart attack, which could have happened even without the earthquake. It was a powerful quake and certainly strong enough to have a death toll. And I felt it in Mukilteo, which is why I ran down the stairwell. I thought I'd be safer outside of my apartment. I was worried about the roof falling on my head. But I suffered no damage whatsoever. Right now, what's happening right now? We are in a palindrome. It started on September 10th, 2019, ends on September 19th, 2019. A palindrome basically means the dates read forward and backward the same. And this is a rare occurrence. And my birthday is September 15th, 1957, my born-again birthday, when I got saved and accepted Jesus and prayed the sinner's prayer, September 19th, 1971. I find this very interesting. And check out these palindrome dates for the 21st century. I started my YouTube channel in January 2011. Notice that's the first red palindrome there, which means it was a 7-digit one. Started on January 10th, 2011, right about the time I started my YouTube channel. And he considers my YouTube channel important enough to make it a Gail commandment for me to make a YouTube video every week. Then Jesus first started communicating with me online, talking to me via Brent Spiner, February 20, where Brent would transcribe for him, February 2012. And notice when the next palindrome hits, February 10th, 2012. Yep, that's right about the time Jesus started talking to me. And my transcript of all my communications with Jesus in Bible for Tribulation Saints via Brent Spiner and my men has been added to the biblical canon. I believe it was this year, 2019, and this month, I think. And notice when the red palindromes end, September 10th, 2019. I mean, wow, look at the timing. It's like all the time when Jesus was talking to me from 2012 to 2019, we had a 7-digit palindrome for every year. And Jesus talked to me every year during that time, except for 2019. He hasn't, this year he hasn't so far. But then I think this is the year all that stuff that I did when he, all the book I made out of it, which is the size of the Bible, got added to the canon. So, and notice that Brent Spiner's birthday is February 2nd. Check out February 2nd, 2020. Wonder what's going to happen on that day. Not sure what the significance of the future dates are. I guess we're going to find out. And now, you know what else is happening? We've got a rare full moon happening this week on Friday, September the 13th. They call it the harvest moon. I'm telling you, Jesus is dropping some strong hints. Strong hints. Now, I've heard Brain to Brain, Bible for Tribulation Saints, has been added to the biblical canon, and it certainly appears that that is the case. And all I can say, folks, is I know myself when I read it that I am getting a lot. It's helping me to grow spiritually. It's helping me remember what Jesus said to me. And I wrote it because Terrance Jenkins asked to have a transcript of everything, of all our communications where Jesus was involved. And as I was doing it, I thought, you know what? I had it. The world deserves to know what Jesus Christ himself has showed up and talked to us. they deserve to know what he said. So I decided to go ahead and organize it into a book. And I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that everything he says will be presented in context. So I made sure to either explain why he said what he said or put the context of the conversation around what he said so that people would understand the full meaning of what Jesus was saying to us. And as I was doing that, I thought, wow, I really should publish this in a book at Kindle and just publish it and let people know what he said to us. And that became Bible for Tribulation Saints. And as I was getting towards the end of working on it, my men were telling me brain to brain, hey, Gail, we've just been informed that major theological seminaries like Dallas Theological Seminary have decided this should be added to the biblical canon. And you know what, it really does. I do believe that that has happened, because look at all the divine signs around the writers. I transcribed it, but I consider the writers to be me, Brent Spiner, Judge Terence Jenkins, Rule 13. No, I don't think she didn't do much, but the major contributors were me, Brent Spiner, Judge Terence Jenkins, Zach Knight were the major writers, so I mentioned them. Though there were some others like Matthew McConaughey, Gerard Butler. They had a little bit of say-so, like around 2012. So anyways, the signs around this are absolutely amazing. I believe my brain to brain is correct. What I'm hearing, apparently it's been added to the canon. This is a super duper big deal. You know, as I go through Bible for Tribulation Saints, it seems to me that the whole, every book has like a theme. And the theme, and I'm actually going to give God, I believe that Jesus inspired me to write it, but the theme seems to be to justify God's character. And he's got an unfair reputation as a cock blocker. And it seems like the theme is a very strong theme on love, sex, and marriage, and justifying God's character in regard to his laws and rules and guidelines in that area. Apparently, during the millennium, the rules for love, sex, and marriage are going to change somewhat. And there are going to be some millennial people living in the millennium who are going to think that Jesus is not fair. And they're going to be the ones who will rebel. Anybody, let me just tell you this right now, folks. I know there are a lot of views about the future, but the pre-tribulation, pre-millennial view is correct. I know that if you read Bible for Tribulation Saints, you will know that. Because the deity himself has said there's going to be a 1,000-year reign. So we already know that it's not, this kingdom now stuff's a bunch of nonsense. The millennium is future. There's going to be a 1,000-year reign. There will be a 7-year tribulation. Jesus himself verified that it's future, and there will be a rapture. And it's what's going to happen is going to be rapture next. That's the next big event on the prophetic timetable. Then we're going to have our 7-year tribulation. And then there's going to be the 1,000-year reign, and then after that, eternity future. Jesus hasn't said much about eternity future, but the focus in Bible for Tribulation Saints has been on the tribulation and the millennium. And I always found it strange that there wasn't much about the millennium in the traditional Bible, Genesis to Revelation, and I believe it's because God knew that he'd be adding to the canon with my Bible for Tribulation Saints. So the millennium saints will be judged, the ones that rebel with Satan towards the end, by what's in Bible for Tribulation Saints. And I believe that it will be part of the biblical canon for the tribulation and millennium saints, and people will be judged by what's in this book and how they responded to it. So it is divinely inspired.